Marcus, did anything happen between us last night? 7 words. Quiet. Almost afraid. They settled in the air of the penthouse kitchen like smoke too thick to breathe through. Marcus Reed's hand froze halfway to the coffee maker. Morning light poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating Chicago's skyline beyond. The Willis Towers standing proud against the dawn, Lake Michigan shimmering in the distance, a city already hustling toward its future. Marcus wasn't moving forward. Across the Marble Island stood his boss, Vanessa Hartley. Barefoot, wrapped in a silk robe she clearly didn't remember owning. The woman who commanded boardrooms from Manhattan to the Magnificent Mile stood before him stripped of every ounce of executive armor, gripping a coffee mug like it was the only thing anchoring her to reality. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, not loud but deep enough to echo, because he knew the answer to her question, and he knew that answer would hurt her less than it would destroy him. How does one night of doing the right thing reveal everything you've been hiding from yourself? How can a single act of protection become the mirror you've been afraid to look into? If you've ever wondered what happens when kindness collides with the truth we bury about who we become, stay with this story. Because what happened in that penthouse wasn't a scandal. It was a revelation that would force Marcus Reed to choose between the man he thought he had to be and the man he'd forgotten he was. Before we continue, kindly tell us where in the world you're watching from today. We want to see how far our story travels. Let's continue. 24 hours earlier, Marcus Reed believed he understood exactly who he was supposed to be. His Friday had started the way every Friday did for the past 3 years. Loud alarm at 5:30 a.m., Caleb's superhero lunchbox packed by 6:15, homeward double-checked, shoes located after the inevitable last-minute hunt. By 7 o'clock, his 8-year-old was delivered to school with a hug that lingered just long enough to remind Marcus why none of this was a sacrifice. It was survival. It was purpose. It was everything. Marcus worked as a senior operations manager at Hartley & Associates, a high-end real estate investment firm with offices overlooking the Chicago River. He was one of only 3 black executives in leadership, a fact he never forgot, even when everyone else seemed to. The work was demanding, the hours unpredictable, but the paycheck kept Caleb in a good school and their Lincoln Park apartment within reach of something resembling stability. His boss, Vanessa Hartley, was a legend in Chicago and New York real estate circles. Brilliant, uncompromising, and polished to a degree that made most people uncomfortable. But she was also the woman who'd quietly approved Marcus's flexible schedule 2 years ago, when Caleb's night terrors got so bad that Marcus had to leave meetings mid-sentence just to get home. She never mentioned it again. Marcus never stopped being grateful. That Friday, the firm was hosting its annual Client Appreciation Gala at the Rookery, a historic landmark building in the Loop, all soaring ceilings and Frank Lloyd Wright skylights, transformed into an upscale celebration overlooking LaSalle Street. Marcus hadn't planned on staying long. Caleb had a science fair presentation Saturday morning, and they'd promised to rehearse his volcano demonstration one more time before bed. But then came the text from his assistant, Jordan. Vanessa specifically asked if you were coming. I want to show face. Marcus checked his watch, checked his phone, checked the mental ledger he kept of every professional debt he owed. He replied, I'll stop by for an hour. The Rookery was packed when Marcus arrived just after 8. The main atrium glowed under Edison bulbs strung between the ironwork, jazz music drifting up from a live quartet in the corner. Colleagues he usually saw in business casual now wore cocktail dresses and tailored suits, voices growing louder as the open bar worked its magic. Marcus navigated through clusters of conversation, nodding at familiar faces, accepting congratulations for the Harper Tower deal he'd closed that quarter. He was looking for Vanessa, just a quick thank you, maybe 5 minutes of FaceTime, then home to Caleb. He found her near the balcony doors overlooking the street. She stood alone in a red gown that turned heads without effort, a champagne flute dangling forgotten in her hand. Several empty glasses sat on the nearby table. Her posture, usually rigid enough to cut glass, swayed slightly. Her laugh, when someone passed with a joke Marcus didn't hear, came half a beat too slow. Something tightened in Marcus's chest. He'd seen this before. 3 years ago. Different woman. Different night. Same warning signs. Marcus Reed's life hadn't always been this quiet. Once, mornings had soundtrack. Alicia Keys playing while he scrambled eggs. His wife Maya singing off-key from the shower. Their laughter filling spaces that now only held echoes. They'd argue about whose turn it was to take out the trash, debate whether Caleb was old enough for a two-wheeler, plan trips to places they'd never get around to visiting. Then came that Tuesday afternoon 3 years ago on the Brooklyn Bridge. Black ice. A truck that couldn't stop. Maya's Honda Civic crushed between steel and concrete while she was driving home from her sister's baby shower. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus learned to navigate it the way sailors learn to navigate fog, carefully, methodically, one bearing at a time. Wake up, make breakfast, pack lunch, check homework, drop off at school, work, pick up, dinner, homework help, bedtime story, promise tomorrow will come. Repeat. Caleb became his North Star. Every decision filtered through a single question. What does my son need? The answer was always the same, a father who shows up. So Marcus showed up, to parent-teacher conferences, to soccer practices, to midnight wake-ups when nightmares about mommy's accident made Caleb's small body shake with sobs Marcus couldn't fix, only hold through. He showed up to work, too, to Hartley and Associates, where glass and steel towers reflected Chicago's ambition back at itself. As senior operations manager, Marcus had earned his seat at the table through deals closed and problems solved, not diversity initiatives or charitable inclusions. He was one of 3 black executives in leadership, a fact that made him hyper-aware of every email, every meeting, every presentation. Respect wasn't given. It was maintained through constant proof. Vanessa Hartley understood that in ways most white executives didn't. She'd built her firm from a single storefront office in Wicker Park into a bicoastal real estate investment powerhouse through brilliance and an almost frightening level of strategic precision. In boardrooms, she was untouchable. Tailored suits, sharp questions, decisions that landed like gavels. But 2 years ago, when Caleb's night terrors peaked and Marcus had to leave a client meeting mid-pitch because the school called, Vanessa had simply nodded. The next week, his schedule showed flexibility he hadn't requested. When he tried to thank her, she waved him off. Your son needs you functional, she'd said. That benefits everyone. She never mentioned it again. Marcus built his gratitude into loyalty. Extra hours, weekend prep work, availability that bordered on excessive. He told himself it was professionalism. Deep down, he knew it was something else, proof that a black single father could be dependable, excellent, uncomplicated. That he could be the kind of employee who didn't bring problems, only solutions. That he could be safe. But safety, Marcus was beginning to understand, had a cost he hadn't calculated. Somewhere between bedtime stories and quarterly reports, between being everything for Caleb and invaluable at work, Marcus Reed had stopped being a person with wants. He'd become a function, and functions don't get seen. They get used. The rookery's atrium glowed like something from another century brought forward in time. Iron scrollwork and marble columns wrapped in Edison bulbs. Frank Lloyd Wright's geometric skylights overhead filtering the Chicago night into amber warmth. Jazz saxophone curled through conversations growing louder with each passing hour, with each refill glass. Marcus checked his phone. 8:47 p.m. Caleb would be asleep by 9:30. Mrs. Patel had texted earlier. Homework done, dinner eaten, kid in good spirits. Marcus could stay another 20 minutes, show his face to the clients who mattered, thank Vanessa properly, then slip out before anyone noticed. He found her near the balcony doors overlooking LaSalle Street. The red gown should have been a warning. Vanessa Hartley didn't do red. She did navy, charcoal, occasionally a power ivory. Red was attention she never needed to demand. But there she stood, the gown's fabric catching light as she swayed slightly, champagne flute dangling from fingers that had forgotten their purpose. Marcus counted the empty glasses on the nearby table. 4. Her laugh came too late when Trevor from marketing passed with some joke. Her posture, usually rigid enough to make Marine drill sergeants jealous, tilted like a building testing its foundation. Marcus knew this pattern. He'd watched Maya's drinking shift from social to medicinal in the months before the accident, back when her anxiety about Caleb's development delays had spiraled beyond what therapy sessions could contain. He'd learned to spot the moment celebration crossed into escape. Vanessa was past that line. Ms. Hartley, Marcus said quietly, approaching from her left side so he wouldn't startle her. She turned, eyes taking an extra second to focus. Marcus, you came. Her smile was genuine but loose at the edges. I wasn't sure you would. Just for a bit. Wanted to say congratulations. The Harper Tower deal was a team effort. You closed it, she corrected, her words slightly thick. Don't diminish yourself. Someone nearby laughed too loud. A phone flashed, someone taking pictures of the executive team clustered near the bar. Marcus watched Vanessa register the cameras, watched her spine, try to straighten and fail. I should probably... She gestured vaguely toward the exit. Let me call you driver, Marcus offered. No. The word came sharp. I sent him home. I'm fine. She wasn't fine. Marcus could see it in the way she gripped the balcony railing, in the careful precision of someone trying to appear sober while the room tilted. Another flash. More phones emerging as the night pushed toward the sloppy side of celebration. Vanessa's eyes met his, and for just a moment, the executive armor cracked completely. I don't want anyone to see me like this, she whispered. Marcus felt the pull of responsibility settle over his shoulders like a familiar coat. He checked his phone. 9:03 p.m. He checked his conscience. Let me help. Vanessa refused the company driver. Too official, too many questions. She refused security. Too many reports filed, too many people knowing. She refused to go home to her Gold Coast townhouse where her doorman would see, where neighbors might talk. The corporate apartment, she said, words careful and slow. River North, the one we keep for out-of-town clients. Marcus knew it. 20th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of luxury that made his Lincoln Park two-bedroom feel like a college dorm. The firm kept it for executives who needed privacy. Privacy. That word landed heavy. Marcus checked his phone. 9:17 p.m. Caleb would be asleep in 13 minutes. Mrs. Patel had this covered. One text, running late, everything okay, and he'd bought himself time to do what clearly needed doing. Leaving Vanessa in this state, at this event, with phones out and her guard demolished, felt fundamentally wrong. Not because she was his boss, because she was human. "I'll drive you," Marcus said. "Get you settled. Make sure you're safe." Her relief was visible enough to hurt. "Thank you." The drive took 12 minutes through Chicago's late-night grid. West on Washington, north on Wells, the city's lights reflecting off the Chicago River as they crossed into River North. Vanessa sat silent in the passenger seat, head tilted against the window, the confident executive replaced by someone small and exhausted. The apartment was excessive in ways that emphasized everything Marcus wasn't. Marble entryway, designer furniture in whites and grays, a kitchen with appliances that probably cost more than his monthly rent. The windows stretched wall to wall, offering Chicago's skyline like a painting commissioned specifically for people who could afford this view. Marcus helped Vanessa to the couch, then moved to the kitchen. Distance, space, boundaries clearly marked. He filled a glass with water, found crackers in the cupboard, set both on a coffee table. "Drink this," he said gently. "You'll feel better." She did, obedient as a child. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This isn't. I don't usually. It's okay. Everyone has hard nights." Marcus found blankets in the hallway closet. He gave one to Vanessa, took the other to the leather couch opposite the windows. The space between them felt important, a distance that said this is help, not opportunity. His phone buzzed. Mrs. Patel confirming Caleb was asleep. Marcus stared at the ceiling, at Chicago's ambient light filtering through glass, at the shape of a decision that felt right in every way that mattered. He'd done the decent thing, the protective thing, the thing any good person would do. Nothing happened. And yet, watching the city breathe beyond those windows, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that everything had. Morning came with the particular kind of light that makes luxury apartments feel like stage sets, too perfect, too curated, too removed from actual living. Marcus woke on the couch with his neck stiff and his phone showing 6:47 a.m. Across the room, Vanessa stirred, confusion crossing her face as she registered her surroundings. The silk robe she found somewhere hung loose over her evening gown. Her hair, usually controlled into submission, fell in waves that made her look younger and more vulnerable than any boardroom had ever allowed. She sat up slowly, pressing fingers to her temples. Then her eyes found Marcus. The question came quietly, almost afraid. "Marcus, did anything happen between us last night?" "No," Marcus said immediately, sitting up. "Absolutely not. Nothing happened." He watched relief wash over her face. Instant, visible, overwhelming. Her shoulders dropped. Her breath released. Her eyes closed briefly as if in prayer. "Oh, thank God." 2 words. Simple. Grateful. They landed in Marcus's chest like stones. Because that relief didn't mean, "Thank God I didn't do something wrong." It meant, "Thank God we didn't cross that line." Thank God her professional reputation remained intact. Thank God the optics stayed clean. Thank God nothing happened with him. Marcus smiled. "I'll make coffee." But inside, something was collapsing in slow motion. Not anger, not resentment, but a recognition so painful it took his breath away. She'd been afraid. Not of assault. Not of violation. She'd been afraid of intimacy with someone like him. Afraid it would matter. Afraid it would complicate things. He was safe because he was professional. Dependable because he was useful. Helpful because he didn't threaten the carefully maintained boundaries of their working relationship. Not because he was desirable. Not because he was seen as a man. Because he was Marcus, the single dad who never caused problems, who worked flexible hours, who showed up early and stayed late, and asked for nothing except the space to be both father and employee. He had become the kind of black man white corporate America could embrace. Competent, non-threatening, convenient. Invisible. Vanessa joined him in the kitchen, apologies tumbling out. "I'm so sorry. This was unprofessional. Thank you for your discretion. I don't know what I was thinking." And each word added weight to the realization settling in Marcus's bones. For 3 years, he'd told himself that erasing his own needs was noble. That being everything for Caleb and invaluable at work meant he was succeeding at life's most important tests. But that morning, standing in a kitchen that cost more than he'd make in 5 years, Marcus finally understood the price of his invisibility. He hadn't just sacrificed romance. He'd sacrificed being seen. By Monday, Vanessa Hartley had reassembled herself completely. The confident executive who commanded attention in every room had returned. Charcoal suit perfectly tailored, hair pulled back with military precision, voice carrying that particular frequency of authority that made junior analysts straighten in their chairs. She addressed Marcus in the morning meeting with professional efficiency. "Excellent work on the Harper Tower projections, Marcus. Your analysis of the South Loop market trends was invaluable. No lingering eye contact, no uncomfortable acknowledgement. Just clean, appropriate distance. Everything was normal. Too normal." Marcus should have felt relief. Instead, he felt like he was watching his life through plexiglass, present but separated, functional but not quite real. The week continued in its established rhythm. Emails, conference calls, Caleb's soccer practice on Wednesday, parent-teacher conference on Thursday, where his son's teacher praised Caleb's improvement in reading comprehension. Friday morning cartoons before school, Caleb's laugh echoing through their apartment in ways that usually made everything else worthwhile. But something had shifted. Marcus found himself replaying that morning in the penthouse. Not the facts. Those were simple, clean, defensible. He replayed Vanessa's relief, the specific quality of her "thank God," the visible loosening of tension when he confirmed nothing had happened. In his bathroom mirror Friday night, after Caleb fell asleep, Marcus studied his own face. 35 years old. Strong jawline Maya used a trace with her fingers. Eyes that still sparked with intelligence when he allowed himself to feel anything beyond exhaustion. When had he stopped seeing himself as someone worthy of desire? When had he accepted that being a good father meant abandoning the parts of himself that wanted more than survival? Saturday morning, Marcus took Caleb to the park near Lincoln Park Zoo. His son sprinted toward the playground with the unself-conscious joy of 8-year-olds who haven't yet learned to perform happiness. Marcus settled on a bench, watching. A woman jogged past, attractive, close to his age, one of those regulars he'd seen dozens of times but never actually seen. She smiled. He nodded politely. She kept running. 3 years ago, he would have noticed that smile differently, would have considered it an invitation rather than just politeness, would have remembered he was allowed to be more than Caleb's father. But he taught himself not to want, taught himself that desire was selfish when you had responsibilities this heavy, taught himself that good single fathers didn't have the luxury of their own needs. And somewhere in that teaching, Marcus had erased himself so completely that even his boss's drunken fear of crossing professional lines felt less like scandal and more like confirmation. You were useful, not wanted. That night, after bedtime stories, Marcus sat in his living room with the lights off, Chicago's distant skyline visible through his window. Smaller, less impressive than the view from that corporate apartment. but his. He wasn't angry at Vanessa. She'd done nothing wrong. He was angry at himself for believing invisibility was the same as integrity. The email came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the gala. Vanessa Hartley to take temporary leave, company restructuring, and executive wellness initiative. Marcus read it twice. The language was corporate smooth, revealing nothing and everything. Burnout hidden behind strategic reflection. Overwhelm disguised as organizational evolution. The second email arrived 20 minutes later. Marcus Reed promoted to acting finance director, effective immediately. His phone buzzed before he could process. Jordan from HR. Congratulations. Well deserved. Vanessa specifically recommended you. Marcus stared at his screen. Promoted. On merit. Because he'd earned it. Not because of guilt. Not because of that night. Because he was actually good at his job. The realization settled strange, like finding money in a coat pocket, unexpected and slightly suspicious. But the promotion came with something else, authority to make decisions, to set boundaries, to say no when necessary rather than absorbing every request that came his way. That Friday, when Trevor from marketing asked Marcus to cover his weekend client calls, Marcus said something he hadn't said in 3 years. No, I have plans with my son. Trevor blinked. Oh, okay, man. No problem. It was that easy. Saturday morning, instead of reviewing reports while Caleb played alone, Marcus laced up sneakers he'd bought 2 years ago and never worn. Come on, bud. One-on-one. Let's see if he can beat the old man. Caleb's face lit up like Christmas morning. They played basketball at the community court for an hour. Marcus rusty but present, his son laughing every time he scored, the October sun warm on their skin. Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd done something just for joy. Sunday, a text arrived from someone unexpected. Denise Coleman, parent from Caleb's school. They'd chatted briefly at the back-to-school night, shared the universal exhaustion of single parenting. Some of us single parents are meeting for coffee next Saturday morning. You interested? Marcus's first instinct was his usual response. Can't, too busy, maybe another time. But he stopped himself. Read the message again. Consider the possibility that accepting help, accepting connection, accepting the fact that he was allowed to have a life beyond duty, maybe that wasn't selfish. Maybe that was survival of a different kind. I'm in, he typed back. The changes were small, incremental, but Marcus felt something shifting in his chest. Not the quiet collapse of that penthouse morning, but something building. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. He didn't need romance. Didn't need validation from his boss or anyone else. He needed to remember he was more than the roles he performed. Father, executive, protector, and also Marcus, a man who was allowed to want things, to take up space, to be seen. Marcus Reed stood in his son's doorway on a random Tuesday night in June, watching Caleb sleep. 9 years old now, face peaceful in a way that only children who feel secure can manage. The nightmares about his mother had faded to occasional echoes, manageable with reassurance and presence. Marcus had given his son stability, safety, love that showed up every single day. He'd done that right. But standing there, Marcus finally understood what that morning in the penthouse had actually shattered. Not his integrity, not his reputation, not his relationship with his boss. It shattered the lie that he had to choose between being a good father and being a whole person. The lie that sacrifice meant erasure. The lie that dependability required invisibility. For 3 years after Maya's death, Marcus had believed his needs died with her, that wanting romance, desiring partnership, craving to be seen as more than a function. Those were luxuries he couldn't afford while raising a son alone. But that question, did anything happen between us? And Vanessa's visible relief when he said no had accidentally revealed the cost of his disappearing act. He hadn't been protecting Caleb by erasing himself. He'd been teaching his son that love means self-destruction. That responsibility means abandonment of self. That being black and a single father in corporate America meant making yourself so unthreatening, so useful, so utterly safe that you became invisible. That wasn't the lesson Marcus wanted to pass down. The changes since then have been gradual, but seismic. Saturday morning coffee with other single parents had become a ritual. Denise Coleman had become a friend. Then something more, slowly, carefully, with honesty about the complications of blending lives that already felt full. At work, Marcus led with confidence that didn't require overfunctioning. He left on time, said no when appropriate, advocated for himself with the same energy he'd always given to others. Caleb noticed. "You seem happier, Dad," he'd said last week, unprompted. Marcus had paused, considering. "I think I'm finally learning how to be happy and responsible. Turns out you don't have to choose." His son had nodded, accepting this with the easy wisdom of children who trust their parents to figure things out. Now, watching Caleb sleep, Marcus felt gratitude for that devastating morning 6 months ago. Not because it felt good, not because he'd wanted that pain, but because sometimes life breaks us just enough to wake us up. That question didn't destroy Marcus Reed's life. It shattered the walls he'd built around it, and in doing so, gave him permission to be whole again. A father, yes, but also a man. Black, yes, but also complex. Dependable, yes, but also deserving of being seen, desired, valued beyond his utility. Single parents don't have to disappear into their responsibilities. Sacrifice shouldn't erase identity. Kindness is most powerful when it flows from wholeness, not depletion. And sometimes the moments that feel like endings are actually the painful, necessary beginnings of becoming who you were always meant to be, not despite your responsibilities, but alongside them. Marcus closed Caleb's door quietly. In the living room, his phone showed a text from Denise. "Coffee tomorrow before school drop-off?" He smiled. "Type back, yes. Looking forward to it." Then he sat by his window, Chicago's lights spreading before him. Not as impressive as that penthouse view, but infinitely more real. His life, his city, his future, finally truly his. The message came 6 months later, in April, when Chicago finally remembered how to be warm. "Marcus, would you have time for coffee? No work talk, just conversation. Vanessa." They met at a cafe in Wicker Park, far from the Loop's corporate landscape. Vanessa arrived in jeans and a simple sweater. The first time Marcus had seen her in anything that wasn't carefully curated for professional consumption. She looked different, softer, more present. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, settling across from him with a latte. "I wasn't sure you would." "Of course. How are you?" Honest answer. Vanessa smiled, but it carried weight. "Better. Finally. I spent 3 months in therapy unpacking why I was working 70-hour weeks and calling it ambition when it was really just avoidance." Marcus nodded. "Avoidance of what?" "Everything." She cupped her mug. "Loneliness. Aging. The fact that I'd built this empire and had no one to share it with. So I just kept building, kept working, kept pretending that being needed professionally was the same as being seen personally." The words hung between them, familiar in ways that made Marcus's chest tighten. That night, Vanessa continued quietly. When I asked if anything happened, the look on your face. She met his eyes. I replayed it constantly, and I realized something awful. Marcus waited. My relief hurt you. Not because you wanted something inappropriate. I know you didn't. But because my relief confirmed that I'd never actually seen you. Not as a person. Just as. She paused, choosing words carefully, as a really good employee who I could depend on without complication. Vanessa, let me finish. Her voice carried the firmness of someone who'd rehearsed this. You were kind to me that night. Protective. Professional. You did everything right. And my response was to be grateful nothing happened. Not because it would have been wrong, but because it would have been complicated. And I'd spent years making sure you were the uncomplicated one. The safe one. She took a breath. That was dehumanizing. I'm sorry. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Not forgiveness, because he'd never blamed her, but recognition that his pain had been seen. Finally, I made myself that person, Marcus said quietly. I erased myself. Thought sacrifice meant disappearing. Thought being dependable meant having no needs. He smiled slightly. We both learned something hard that night. That kindness needs boundaries to stay healthy. That strength deserves recognition, Marcus added. Not just gratitude. They talked for 2 hours. Not as boss and employee. Not as professional contacts networking, but as two humans who'd accidentally held mirrors up to each other's most carefully hidden truths. When they parted, it was with mutual respect. No scandal. No romance. Just two people who'd survived their own particular kinds of invisibility and were learning, slowly, to take up space again.